إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله ما لنا رب
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وكذلك نري إبراهيم ملكوت السماوات والأرض وليكون من الموقنين. Respected brothers and sisters in Islam, the surah that we are reciting and that which we will continue to recite tonight, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the surah is speaking about the base of or the core aqeedah of the mushrikeen, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is dismantling their aqeedah through examples, logical examples and different types of explanations and stories of the prophets. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that only if you can see the people on the day of judgment, the mushrikeen, those that worship besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when they see the truth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will say, Wallahi ma kunna mushrikeen. I swear by Allah, Wallahi, never in our lives did we ever make partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in one place says that Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, as we know, that he grew up in a household and in a nation and a community where shirk was the way to go. Means if you were not asking from the idols, if you were not making sujood to those idols, something was wrong with you. Not only that, his own father, Azar, was a man who had a business, and that too a business of making and selling idols. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, as a young boy, is trying to explain to his family, he is trying to explain to his community that these idols that you are worshipping and that you are making dua to, they cannot even hear you. They do not even respond to your dua. And the food that you place in front of it, the flies that come and sit on that food, your idols are not even powerful enough to move those flies. And we know the story Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself gives later on, where it was their Eid and their festival day, and all of them went out to have a good time. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam said, I'm not going because I'm sick. His family thought that he was sick, maybe he had a fever. But Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam was sick of that belief or that prostration to those idols. So he stayed back. He went, when everybody left, he went to the room in which all of the idols were placed. He took an axe and he butchered and crushed all of the idols except for the biggest one that was there. And he took that axe and he hung it on the neck of the biggest one. The people come back, and now they, after having a good day outside, now they want to come back to the idols and their gods, and now they want to make dua and they want to thank their gods. And this is actually very important. The day of Eid is coming up right after the month of Ramadan. Let it not be that whatever we have worked on ourselves from ibadat and qiyam and Quran recitations goes down the drain, even to the point that sometimes on the day of Eid our salah are totally gone. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us ability, ameen. So they come back to worship the idols, and they see that all the idols are crushed on the floor. And they see that the axe is hanging from the biggest one's neck. They ask around that who can possibly do this, who was left behind. Some people said there's a man, a young boy by the name of Ibrahim, and he was from day one against these idols. Let's go ask him. So they come to Ibrahim alayhi salam, they say that, what happened here? You know what happened? Did you do this? He said, I don't know, ask the big one. The axe is in his neck. And then they knew that of course the idol cannot do anything. So Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam is explaining to them in different ways. The example mentioned, or the story mentioned in the surah that was recited, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Ibrahim alayhi salam, he came to his people and he said that what type of things are you worshipping? Here you're worshipping an idol. Can you imagine making an idol, putting a price tag on your idol, and then selling your God? He said, what are you worshipping? If I was you, I would worship something bigger, something better. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam took him out at nighttime. And he said, here, look towards the sky. You see these amazing stars. And how beautiful they look. Let's worship these. Let's worship the stars. So now when it was morning time, and you couldn't see the stars no more, Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, even this is not worthy of worship. Because God is free of this type of changing, that sometimes He's there and sometimes He vanishes and He's gone. What type of God is this? Then Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, next day he says, now look at the moon. The moon is more bigger than the stars as we see it. And it's more beautiful than the stars. Let's worship the moon. And then in the daytime the moon is also gone. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam said, this is also not worthy of worship. And then the next day, Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, in the daytime, he tells his people, he says, now look at the sun. This has the most light in it. And it's the biggest. And it's one that we need more than the moon and the stars. Let's worship the sun. But when it was nighttime, the sun was also gone. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam is explaining to his people from the very beginning that none of these things are worthy of our worship. If anything that is worthy of our worship, and if there's anyone that is worthy of our worship, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all alone. Oftentimes, we also forget when our family member is sick, our children are sick. Right away we go to the medicine without asking Allah, without making dua to Allah. We're gonna, toss that pill down our throats. Make dua to Allah subhanahu. Never forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For everything you need, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'll finish with one example Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives about these idols or things besides Allah that people worship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that I'm giving you an example, فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ. Give it an attentive ear. He then says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ لَن يَخْلُقُوا ذُبَابًا وَلَوْ اجْتَمَعُوا لَهُ. All of these people that you ask for help, that you make dua towards, that you supplicate towards, all of them, if they get together, they cannot make something as simple as a fly. Can anyone create a fly? No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said all of them get together. They cannot make something as small as a fly. And if that fly was to take something away from them, let's say he's like a super stingy guy, and he wants to finish the last bite and the last morsel of his food and every grain and every drop of curry that's in his plate, and a fly comes and he takes a little bit away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, even if you wanted to, you couldn't take it away from that fly. Now, amazing the example Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave. We know that there are chips that are smaller than that of a fly, that hold large amounts of data. We also know that there are robots that could be designed the size of a fly or maybe even smaller. But look at the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said if everyone got together, they cannot produce something as small as a fly. If it's a robot and the one controlling it controls it or orders it to go to the right, it will go to the right. If it tells it and orders it to go to the left, it will go to the left. If it tells it to fly high and high and higher, it will fly higher. But look at the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This fly does not need any remote control. It has a brain of its own. It has eyes of its own. It has a heart of its own. It has feelings of its own. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala embed this aqeedah and this belief firmly in our hearts, that the one that is to be asked for, the one that we supplicate towards is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us our deepest wishes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take care of our hajat and our needs. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله ما لنا رب سواه